So, what happens when your body's own defense system, your immune system, gets its wires completely crossed? Today, we're diving into a really perplexing medical riddle where the body isn't just launching one attack against itself, but two at the exact same time.
Just take a look at this. These are the hands of a person in constant, terrible pain. It really tells a story of a body at war with itself. But what if the diagnosis, the very name for that war, is wrong? Or, even worse, what if it's incomplete?
All right, so our story starts with a 42-year-old man. And for nearly a decade, he and his doctors were just locked in this incredibly frustrating battle against what they thought was a single, pretty well-known disease. But his symptoms, they just weren't adding up.
I mean, this timeline really shows a decade of just pure frustration. He gets diagnosed with lupus, or SLE, way back in 2013, but for 6 straight years, the standard treatments do almost nothing for his severe arthritis. Then, in 2019, a newer drug helps a little, but he still can't get off high-dose steroids. And then things just get worse. Recurrent infections, multiple hospital stays. The treatment plan just wasn't working.
And this right here, this just captures his desperation. The pain was so bad, so unrelenting, that he started taking matters into his own hands, giving himself these massive doses of steroids. We're talking up to 50 milligrams a day, which is way, way beyond the safe level, just to be able to function. This wasn't a solution. It was a total cry for help.
So this brings us to the absolute heart of the puzzle. If he had lupus, why weren't the treatments controlling his most debilitating symptom, this severe, destructive arthritis? The doctors were hitting a wall, and they knew they had to start looking for a totally different answer.
Okay, so to crack this case, we kind of need to understand the two main suspects here. On one side, you've got rheumatoid arthritis, and on the other, you have systemic lupus erythematosus. Now yeah, both can cause joint pain, but they are very different diseases with their own unique calling cards.
So let's break this down. Rheumatoid arthritis, or RA, is famous for being the joint destroyer. It really zeroes in on the joints, causing inflammation that can literally eat away at the bone. Then you've got lupus, or SLE, which is known as the great imitator, because, well, it can affect pretty much any part of the body, and the lab tests are looking for different flags too. RA often has markers like rheumatoid factor and anti-CCP, while SLE has others, like ANA and anti-dsDNA.
All right, now, let's jump back to our patient. It's 2022. After years and years of struggling, new tests finally start to show that his body wasn't just fighting one war, but two. The worlds of RA and SLE had actually collided inside his body.
And this was the turning point, October 2022. All of a sudden, his blood work comes back positive for rheumatoid factor. That's a huge marker for RA. X-rays confirmed the damage. You could see clear bone erosions and shrinking joint spaces, which are classic signs of RA, not typical lupus. But here's the kicker. He still had the classic butterfly rash of SLE. It was undeniable. He had both.
And this finally led to a new and much more accurate diagnosis, Rhupus Syndrome. That's the name for this rare overlap condition where a patient is basically fighting two different autoimmune diseases at the same time. They check all the boxes for both RA and SLE.
And when we say rare, we are not kidding. One huge study looked at over 4,000 hospitalized lupus patients and found that only 1.3% of them also had this overlap with RA. It's an incredibly rare thing to find.
So, why is lupus so hard to spot? I mean, why did it take almost a decade for this guy to get the right diagnosis? Well, the answer is in this tricky little rule that doctors have to follow when they're classifying these diseases.
The whole problem comes down to something called the attribution rule. It's a key principle doctors use to try and avoid misdiagnosing someone, but in a super rare case like lupus, that very rule can end up hiding the truth.
And this quote? Oh man, this explains everything. The official rule for diagnosing lupus says you can only count a symptom if it isn't better explained by something else. So for years, doctors saw this patient's severe, bone-eroding arthritis and thought, well, that looks a lot more like RA, so we can't count it for his lupus diagnosis. They were attributing the joint damage to something else, not realizing it was a whole second disease happening at the same time.
But here's the thing. When you look at the data from big groups of patients, these really clear patterns start to show up. In one study, 100% of the Rhupus patients had that bone-eroding arthritis, compared to zero in the regular lupus group. Rhupus patients also had fewer kidney and nerve problems,
but way higher levels of those specific RA antibodies. It's a totally distinct profile, hiding right there in plain sight.
But getting the diagnosis right. This wasn't just about giving his illness a new name. No, this unlocked the door to a completely different and finally an effective treatment strategy.
So, instead of just treating lupus, the doctors could now specifically target the biological pathways that were driving his rheumatoid arthritis. They chose a type of drug called a JAK inhibitor, which is known to be really good at calming down the exact kind of inflammation that destroys joints in RA.
And the results were just stunning. Seriously, look at this chart of his progress. The top two lines, that's the disease activity for his lupus and his arthritis. See how they both just plummet after the new treatment starts? But the most amazing line, for me, is the one at the bottom. That's his steroid dose. After a decade of being stuck on them, it finally drops, all the way to 0.
Can you imagine? Within just a few weeks, his joint pain and swelling got so much better. He was able to get off the high-dose steroids completely, and for the next year and a half, he stayed in a state of low disease activity, free from all the side effects and infections that had been making his life miserable for years. It was an absolutely life-changing turnaround.
You know, as the researchers who wrote about this concluded, this one single case sends a really powerful and hopeful message. It shows that with the right diagnosis and the right targeted therapies, even a super complex condition like rheumatoid can be managed effectively.
This patient's 10-year journey for an answer is such a powerful reminder that, in medicine, a precise diagnosis is absolutely everything. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other conditions, what other Rhupus riddles are still out there just hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to finally connect the dots?